As we said at the beginning, there's one person in the midst of you who owns a home. And we want you, one by one,
after all this discussion, to be like,
to try to guess who that person is.
You're dressed like a homeowner. I don't know what that means.
It's getting spicy now.
Amy,
Stand up for yourself, man.
Generation, like the honey I'm home kids era, where they could like have a house with a single income and it was all fine.
Looking at it in the most simplistic way, like our needs aren't being met.
okay, Julian, get it rolling.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first question that we wanna jump into specifically is asking you if you would like housing prices to rise, stay the same, or fall. Seems like a crazy thing to jump into straight away, but
Right.
I can start. I think, so obviously there are a lot of people out there who are hoping housing prices are going to rise because it's, for a lot of people, housing is an investment. For me, I'm hoping that housing prices fall. Just thinking about me and other people in my generation, just having the kind of the ability to look forward and hope that housing will become more affordable and buying a home will become more affordable in the future is like just would be a really like encouraging sight and give me a lot of hope about my generation's next steps.
Theo, you put that so well.
Oh, thank you very much.
I agree with your statement. Yeah, like Theo said, I don't own a home, so it's not in my interest. So that they rise. I'm like a renter, and I probably see myself renting for a while. So like for the foreseeable future, I will probably want them to lower because I pay a decent amount, and it's like a good cut of what I make monthly.
How much do you?
How much do I pay?
Yeah.
Sure, I pay $11.50. Yeah. I paid more in the past. But it seems like, I don't know, my circle's not, it just seems like in comparison to what my friends pay, it's pretty average. My $11.50 includes the utilities and like the hydro and everything else. So yeah, it's a flat rate. I don't pay like, it's not fluctuating because I have to pay like heating or water, but I mean, it'd be nice to pay less to live more.
Here.
I was just saying more live less. So, to piggyback off your point, to add to that, I agree. Like, housing prices should go lower.
Yeah, agree with that. And housing, I think, is one of the most like important social determinants of health, and just the amount of unhoused individuals we have in the city is steadily rising. And if they don't have homes, it's harder to get jobs, have a livelihood, to access food, and all that. So yes, very much for the prices to go down.
I've been thinking about it from more of like a long-term investment opportunity or perspective, and how I'm renting right now and I'm okay with where it's at, but eventually I want to get like an investment outside of Canada, like a property that can help long-term support whether I'm renting here or whether I like have a house here and then have a second income coming in.
I also think like not just in terms of having investments, I think owning a home and like being able to return somewhere and be like, I own this, like I live here. Because I just moved like a few days ago, and like the thought of like having to check whether or not I can drill a TV into my wall, or like whether I can paint the wall, or like, oh my god, when am I gonna have to leave because like the rent is too high, the stress that puts on somebody, and the fact that it's just like the norm is a little crazy. Yeah, and like thinking into my future, not to be like I have no prospects, but like in terms of home ownership, I feel like I have no prospects. Like there's no place where I can like A, purchase a home and call it an investment, and B, like have a home.
Yeah, and even if you did want to buy a house, like you could, but you'd be setting yourself so far back.
I really could not, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's doable.
I think there's a certain time period in which you could be a grocery bagger and make a livable wage to the point where you can afford your own house, pay your rent, cover your kind of living basis. But I think now that we have prioritized capitalism and we essentially live in an oligarchy where corporations take everything for themselves, for the top 1% of the rich, housing investments are seen exactly like that, as investments rather than domain for the public good and survivability. So it's just very twisted with the fact that like the rise of inflation and housing prices, the rise of income like does not reflect or equate that to the slightest degree, which I think furthers all of our points here. Like everybody deserves a home, prices should go down.
Am I allowed to ask a question to like the room?
Of course, yeah.
Can I like ask what people do?
Yeah.
Or am I?
Yeah.
You absolutely can.
Okay, I was okay.
Go for it.
I was curious what people do.
Let's all go, starting from Uma's side, what each person does.
I'm a student. I'm an international student and I study art.
I'm an actor.
I'm a general manager of a restaurant.
I basically do project management and operations for a nonprofit, and I do social impact coaching and consulting on the side.
I work as a bartender server.
Currently, I'm a student.
I work at actually an affordable housing startup based out of this building.
Also a student in med school.
I work in consulting.
Cool. Well, let me ask you this question. Do you think the housing situation for our generation is worse than it was for past generations?
It's cooked. So
I mean, if you look at it as like an investment vehicle, then like, yeah, I mean, it's really bad. I don't think it's ever been this bad for young or first-time home buyers, people who want to enter the market. But I was thinking that, you know, I think the city is probably the coolest it's ever been, with like more opportunity, more places to go. Like, you know, it's a very vibrant city with lots of different cool neighborhoods. Maybe it wasn't like that 20 years ago. Maybe that home value actually is like 3 times, 4 times what it was, simply if you look at the quality of life, but maybe not.
But what do you consider, what factors go into quality of life when you?
Yeah, right. So I would think like local businesses. You know, I would say transportation or proximity to work, and what kind of work, what kind of communities are you actually around? And I think Toronto right now is a special area for connection and for living. Yeah, I don't want housing prices to go down only because I don't want the political instability. I think it's not just like homeowners or landlords or banks that have an interest in housing prices, it's also municipal government. It's like 50% of the tax they take is actually coming from the property tax. So if you don't have that revenue coming in, you might have some serious trouble down the line. It could work that the housing prices are the same, but then our purchasing power go up, or we just start making more money. If the economy takes off with, say, AI or some sort of, next leg up, you could have the same price, but all of a sudden it's actually technically affordable.
I want to piggyback on your point about quality of life, because I found myself when I was living in the suburbs, it was much better for me to live here because I had access to transportation. I could walk to the grocery store, I could walk to my job, I could walk to the local businesses or the restaurants, or grab like a tea or coffee or whatever it might be. And I feel like that as an investment was much better for me compared to living in an area where I had to drive everywhere, right? And adding on to my carbon footprint. And then on top of that, just having to walk miles just to get to the grocery store or visit a doctor or go to a walk-in clinic or something. So I feel like I definitely agree with that, and I feel like you have to think about the other aspects as well, like who's in your neighborhood, what's around it, and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're paying for much of a lifestyle.
Exactly.
In terms of being better or worse off than past generations, I would say there's kind of like a stark divide amongst young people. It's generally the case that young people aren't going to be able to afford a home with their own earnings unless they're working in a very high-paying field. And there's, I guess, a divide between those whose parents own a home in the city and those who don't. Like for me, for example, when I think of housing down the line, I can't imagine myself earning enough money to buy a home, but I am in the lucky situation where my parents own a home in Toronto, which for them has turned into quite a valuable asset because of the rising housing prices. And so I do think that creates a divide in our generation between those who really don't have access to home ownership because they don't have that asset that their family owns in housing, and those who, although they might not be able to afford a home on their own earnings, will likely be able to enter the housing market because of that security from their family and that asset. So I do think that has a lot of negative repercussions, because if you think about our parents' generations, a lot of people bought homes on their own dime and through their own work, and it seems like we're moving away from that world where home ownership may become more of like a family privilege rather than like something you can earn on your own.
I think it's very eye-opening when day to day I go to work with a bunch of smart people that make way more money than me, in the high six-figure range, and I have a conversation with one of them. He is currently renting some a property with his fiance, and he says something along the lines of, I don't know how I'll be able to afford a home in in the next couple of years. I'm like, you make X amount of money, you make nearly 200K, and you are sharing income with somebody, and you still have to ask yourself how am I going to be able to afford a home? I think that's the most obvious sign of just what are we doing with housing prices? The thing is in working with corporate jobs, not everybody's going to be working a corporate job. That's not how society works. And despite being able to work in a high-powered, very gate-kept but relatively well-paying job, especially right out of university, and you talk to your colleagues that are 5 levels above you and they are still questioning whether they can afford a home despite sharing income with somebody and paying off rent with their partner, it's very at that point I kind of shut off the lights in even thinking about how can somebody who, as you may have mentioned, somebody who may not come from wealth, somebody who might be a newcomer to the country, not have an established network, social mobility in Canada, moving to the province as a newcomer, you might be an immigrant, you might be a refugee. Step 1 to step 10 to affording a house, the picture is so blurred, and I think we've lost the plot. And I think you get really granular in terms of brainstorming all the different economic factors that go into the housing market, who are the players in that. But if you take 5 steps back and you count the simple fact that you're making 150, 170K and you still need somebody to pay off a house with, it's what are we doing here?
It's also the ideological differences between us and the prior generation, the honey, I'm home kids era where they could have a house with a single income and it was all fine. And then they tell you to just, stop spending your money on these other things. I always hear that one meme about the avocados for millennials, stop putting your money there. So just the lack of understanding between our generations too on this sort of concept is kind of frustrating.
I was wondering about do you even own a home? Because a lot of I guess youth now or young adults where getting the house but we're going on a mortgage so the bank owns the house. And then individuals, especially elders, our parents who own the house, what if they can't pay it off and let's say they pass away and they're going to pass that debt on to you. So it's going to go down intergenerationally until somebody can pay it off. And at the end of the day, you still don't own the house. So it's an added debt on top of let's say your student loans or your credit card debt or anything like that. So it's yes, I do want a house, but don't want the added expenses, the property tax and all that to come along with it.
You guys, this is a fantastic conversation.
You guys are brilliant.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Can I ask, what comes to mind when you think about homeowners becoming more wealthy from rising home values while you pay more and more in rent? Especially if some of the homeowners who might be coming... I'm going to ask the question again. What comes to mind when you think about homeowners becoming more wealthy from rising home values while you pay more and more in rent, especially if some of those homeowners becoming more wealthy might be your parents? How does that make you feel?
The image that comes to my mind is a giant mosquito attaching itself to my neck and sucking my blood dry. Even if it's my parents.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was literally like what flashed in my mind.
A lot of people in Canada who are homeowners aren't a lot of them aren't incredibly wealthy, and their home is their asset. And we don't want to artificially drive down home prices so that people basically lose wealth who aren't independently wealthy other than this one asset they own. But I do think there are cases where people who own, let's say let's take a university town for example, who own 20 houses in that university town and are generating kind of egregious amounts of income off the backs of students, and those houses are becoming more valuable in those communities because people know there's a constant stream of renters coming through. Obviously that has more, in my mind, a negative connotation where you're really generating a ton of wealth off people who have to pay for housing and who oftentimes don't have a lot of money. So I don't know if I necessarily have an answer of how it makes me feel, but it's the kind of issue that isn't a one-stop shop to fix all. You have to be conscious of people who have a house, and that's their wealth, and it's wealth that they've counted on their whole life, while at the same time recognizing that there are a lot of people earning an amount of money from owning homes that probably doesn't make sense for the well-being of our country as a whole.
Yeah, I also think about you know what? As a renter, I have mobility. I can just leave. You can't do that. I mean, you can do that, but it's a huge pain. So, I think there are benefits to renting, and I don't think I'd be resentful of, homeowners who ended up making the right bet over, the last decade or so. I know people personally who've had their home prices jump double, and it's I'm happy for them. And I'm sad for myself. But I don't hate them. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a disconnect there. I agree with that. I'd never be mad at someone who got their house fair and square. But what I do feel really disconnected with is when there's for example, my landlord has a monopoly in Little Italy, and I know he targets students or people close to my age, younger in their 20s, and that's just something I can't subscribe to. I think that's weird and exploitative.
Yeah, I also feel a funny type of way about people who take unwarranted pride in their ability to be able to afford a home 50, 60 years ago, and then displacing that on the younger generation to say, yeah, people in your generation workforce are generally more lazy, you generally are more likely to be fired. There's literally no correlation with that. You were playing Fortnite on season 1, and I'm Fortnite season God knows what iteration. Things are tremendously, exponentially, just way more difficult in terms of thinking about housing affordability.
You cooked with that one.
Thank you.
I don't necessarily feel like my enemy are the homeowners that own homes, and there's a reason I can't I don't necessarily feel like they're my ops in this situation. I like a lot of people said I feel like it's the landlords that have monopolies that are that are profiting off other people in those ways. So to answer your question of how do you feel about homeowners when they could be your own parents or whatever, my parents personally are not in those positions, and I feel like that's true for a lot of people who come from my type of background, immigrant families, not super high income families. So yeah.
What this makes me think of is landlords, people who professionally own these homes. You could think that the profit, they would deserve that profit if they were assuming a real amount of risk. You know, that's part of the deal if ownership is you're actually owning also the risk of like putting in money into that thing. And so if we have a system of governance that is constantly propping up the housing market, so it's a can't fail solution, that's a housing bubble. There is no risk and you're still getting profit, you know, without actually any downside whatsoever. You know, it's a little suspect for sure.
Little sus. Little sussy.
Just to ask a question about that point, because I think like you do bring up a really interesting piece, which is like the risk aspect of it. I think when we look at like our we look at the housing crisis that we're in right now, and a lot of the people in Canada's housing agency or in the political level or the real estate sector think that we need kind of support from the private sector and the public sector to solve this problem. How do you think you navigate having private sector involvement and having people who are building housing and taking risks to build housing on yet?
I would say if you take Europe as an example, they've built a lot of public housing, and in building lots of public housing, you do decrease the demand for housing, and as a result, lower the rent that people have to pay for housing. There's a lot of like different solutions that people suggest. One of them is, which I've heard, is expropriation, where the public buys privately owned housing that will now be offered not for profit. And a solution like that to me really seems counterintuitive. Putting money into buying housing that already exists and making it public. I think we should be building public housing and just adding to the housing stock. And the reality is, even the European countries that are building lots of housing, like lots of public housing, it's still only around 20%, I think, that's public. So the private sector is going to have to fill the rest of that percentage that we need. So I think encouraging the public or the government and the public sector to build more housing just increases supply and drives prices down. But we should also encourage like a strong environment for the private sector to continue to build homes and add to the supply.
I think whatever way you look at it, there is like a high amount of discrepancy between the public and private's offering to the public in terms of the housing units that they are providing to us through like the development of new properties. Like there's a disconnect between what's being offered to us and like what we actually need. Like 7, 8+ story buildings being built like in downtown Toronto, like a strip across from like Union Station to the well. So like you'd think like, wow, all these new houses, like maybe this would benefit society, but like 70% of those units are single person units. Like who does that help here? You know what I mean? It benefits people who are working downtown, who have the disposable income, that they are lucky enough to be in the top quartile of society, making like top 10% of income, to be able to like have a shot at like having a roof over their heads. That helps like 1% of society. Like that's like it doesn't do anything for us. Like looking at it in the most simplistic way, like our needs aren't being met.
Where would you rank housing in terms of issues that decide your vote?
Like when voting in elections?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What other kind of vote would there be?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
Sorry, I just feel powerful behind this table.
I think potentially high, but I mean they have to make the right pitch. You know, if they're just talking about housing and they don't actually have a solution, I mean it's not enough for the vote. If they make it center to the campaign and they're telling a compelling narrative, and there is the possibility for that because housing is central to urban planning. Like how are these cities, how are our neighborhoods actually being shaped? You know, so how do we want to live? I mean that is like the central question. And I don't really see any party really answering that question in a compelling way for me. But it could be high. It could be high.
I will also say, like, I feel that me personally, I'm not as like mindful of, you know, what politicians say about housing, or like how parties approach housing, or all the intricacies that some of you have mentioned, and like have articulated very well. I feel like as somebody who like, I work several jobs, I rent, I'm like a young person in Toronto, I feel like I don't have a lot of capacity to like seek out all these ways that I can like improve the housing crisis. But yet I feel like the responsibility is like thrust upon me that like I have to be the one to fix this issue, or I have to be the one to like to be like writing to politicians or doing this or that to solve the issue, when I feel like my plate is already so full with all these other things of just like trying to survive in the city. So whether or not I fully understand the intricacies of why we are where we are, at the core of it, like I, myself, and a lot of other people are struggling and like suffering in some cases. There are a lot of unhoused people, and whether or not they know why they're in that situation, the reality is that they are in that situation. And I don't know if that answers the question, but like I feel a lot of fatigue about this, because I'm like, oh my god, everything sucks so bad, blah, blah, blah. But like I don't really feel any like hope about it, nor do I feel like I have capacity to like see the light.
Right. It's so like extracurricular at this point to even think about like
exactly.
What is it? Like I would never go home after a long day of work and be like, wow, I'm gonna think about my housing situation right now.
Yeah, right.
It's it doesn't doesn't serve really, or everyone's so overworked. That makes complete sense. I mean,
But it still affects all of us, even though we might not have like myself, I don't have capacity to think about it, but it still affects me. It's like I feel like I'm just like at a dead end where I'm like, well, this is my life. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that a lot of young people just don't have the time to look into what parties are doing the most around housing. Like I'll open up the floor here, but like I work in housing and I don't necessarily know who I should be voting for in the next federal election, like who's going to do the most to make housing more accessible for young people. I mean, anyone here, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd assume you're all in that same boat where you're not really sure which party is like taking the lead on housing. And I do think that if a party came forward and took the lead on like, we're going to be the ones who are going to make housing more accessible for young people, there's a huge young demographic that hasn't necessarily aligned themselves with the party yet that would be potentially up for grabs as a voter base if they took housing on, took making housing more accessible.
So in our education, it's not like they teach us how to like read into policy or laws or who's saying what, and not everyone what they're saying is necessarily what's going to happen. Like we can't assume the best intentions all the time. So when you add that sort of nuance into it, it's like, what are you supposed to do? Especially after like you're saying like a long day's worth of work. Are you going to go home and start like subliminally interpreting these different policies or whatever?
I also feel like I can't really trust politicians. Like I feel like I've voted in like several like provincial and like I think one federal election. I don't remember the whole thing. But I feel like since then not much has changed for the better. And so it makes me like wonder like, are you guys, what are you guys doing up there? It's like, you know when like, it's like, you know when like presidents or like prime ministers like tweet about like, somebody has to do something about this. It's like, bro, who do you think, like you're literally the mayor, like you're literally, I saw like, not to like name drop her, but like Olivia Chow, I saw like a news headline that was like Mayor Chow is like frustrated and outraged at the rate of snow removal in the city. And I was like, bro, you're the mayor. And I know that it's more complicated than that. There's like, you know, things are delegated and are in different departments. It's so frustrating to be putting all of your livelihood and like all of your trust in these people and nothing changes. It's like, why are we even doing this?
It makes you feel helpless, like if the
Literally.
mayor can't help.
How do you best think you can make your voices heard as like a member of this young demographic?
Well, I think I have a biased answer because I know one of my good friends, Julian, he runs a I don't know what to call it, a nonprofit, like an entrepreneurial venture in which he takes the voice of students through surveys, consolidates it through research it, and presents it to policy decision makers and people who have a stake in like building like housing developments, gets those student voices heard, influences policy. So short answer,
Yeah, I think we can start off by responding to Olivia Chow's tweet because why not? But more so than that, I think there's a lot of power in our independent voices, and you know, as the youth, we do have more power than what we necessarily see. Like Andy was saying, there are so many like important student groups out there, so many parties hold these different meetings, for example, where you can sort of bring your voice to the table and just let them know what you're also thinking. And I suggest anyone here run for public office and maybe make that change for us, going beyond just tweeting.
Yeah, I think the number one way, honestly, is to involve yourself in politics and local politics. I find that a lot of people in our generation get super caught up in like huge geopolitical issues, but forget to get involved in like the issues right at their doorstep. I think what you'll find if you go to volunteer for MP who's knocking on doors in the federal election is that they love to have young people around, and they all want to get young people more engaged in politics. And if you do get engaged and you do talk about what's of interest to you, I think for the most part, in my experience, like politicians have a lot on their plate, but they're always try their best to listen, especially the young people who they want to get engaged.
For me, I find that a lot of youth organizations hold like community consultations, which I think is like really a great way to like bring youth voices and I guess like in terms of like what they need to be addressed. And I've been part of a couple of like community consultations, and I find that it's really good because like it represents like a lot of range of people, and they come in and they have all sorts of views that they want to voice out regarding the situations that they're in. Yeah, let's say community consultations are pretty good.
Nothing new, but yeah, communicating, talking to friends about it, staying open, staying hungry, stay determined. But yeah, I don't know. I bank so much on like social media to inform myself that I don't know. Yeah, putting in a bit of effort, whatever way it looks like to you, to stay updated and know what's going on around you, and being a part of, you know, your community. Yeah, just putting yourself out there, even if it's uncomfortable, or saying yes to something like this. I think it helps the cause so much more than not.
Well, I follow up on what everyone said. I really think it's about having youth voices at the table, and I mean literally at the table. I've been in movement spaces where they're like, oh, let's like fight for the right of like women and girls to education, but the people at the table are like
men.
That too, but also people that are come from a very well socioeconomic background. They have, you know, they have the finances, they have like the privilege and the opportunities to get to where they need to be. And they're like, oh, let's like, you know, let's set up shop in like Guatemala and like teach the women there. But I've never seen, well, that was more like maybe a year or two ago, but still now there's issues where there's no youth at the table talking about their issues and their concerns. And once you get youth into those rooms, then that's where, you know, organizations or individuals in these spaces can understand like, okay, like they're the ones who are going through this, they're the ones that are being affected, right? So how can we learn from them and actually not just learn, but implement into action so we can make this situation or whatever it is better. And it's also about just encouraging and just getting out there. And I was talking to Rhea earlier about if you want to make an impact, you know, especially in the space of like housing and politics, we can get our voices heard, but it's also about, you know, you have to be in those rooms, you have to be at the assembly, you have to be in Congress or whatever it is, right? And you have to be at that policy level making stage.
I mean, I think we do have the time to educate ourselves. And I think, you know, this is a very complicated system. So it might seem overwhelming, but before coming here, I was asking ChatGPT about it. Just throwing out some ideas. Well, why is it like this? Why is it like that? I found it actually surprisingly interesting and accessible. And I think actually most people would probably, if they came in contact with this, you know, how this means to our personal lives and the lives of everybody that you know, and they might find it more interesting than they think. As far as, you know, making sure your voice is heard, starts with posting on social media every day. You gotta grind it out. You gotta pick hook-worthy content, and also, you know, just stay consistent.
I like your answers, Max. I'm gonna be
Thank
honest.
you.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like my 6th time doing it now, so forgive me. I should have it. I should
Damn,
have it down
alright,
this time.
alright,
No,
that's
there were like 10 people at first.
No,
I had to do it
he
like
was being
I was.
I know,
I was making fun of myself.
He was being spiteful.
no one else. Just like as understanding the backdrop of this idea that young people are busy just trying to survive. Like that's something you said earlier that I think really resonated with everyone. That like.
Most people.
Yeah, most people, sure. That most people are just like trying to make a living. Like most people are having a tough time just like being a renter.
You know, like focus on bettering our community at hand rather than like starting from at large. Like good things happen. I think that like not just in terms of this issue, but in terms of a lot of issues, perfection or purity is like the enemy of any sort of progress. Like we think that we have to like fix everything, or we have to be like perfect. And in the end, we don't do anything at all. I think it's important to do like little things in community with others.
A long journey begins with the first step.
Fantastic.
I think that obviously the first step is to be like educated and to know what's going on. But I think the easiest thing to do to get your voice heard is to just like, there are so many campaigns or nonprofits or even like tenant unions that you can join to get your voice out there. But I think that so many people hold back on doing that because it seems like such a big step and it seems like so hard to like get yourself out there and to actually use your voice in a space where it feels like people are more experienced than you. But I think just joining, like everyone's been saying the same thing, but I think it's really just community and like joining spaces where your voice can be heard and like coming from a different mindset, not as like old, as not old, but like older generation as other people, and like just being able to express yourself in a space where you will be heard is probably the best thing for you to be able to do.
Like this right here.
Yes,
Yeah. Well, I wanna follow up on that other question because I think like one of the first things we asked was, do you want housing prices to stay the same, increase, or fall? And most of you answered that you want housing prices to fall. But in 2024, Prime Minister Trudeau said that homes need to retain their value because people are counting on that wealth in retirement.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your
Express yourself.
perspective around housing prices needing to fall for it to be more accessible for you is being reflected in the broader climate in Canada right now?
I just find that really rich coming from Justin Trudeau, with the fact that he openly spends tens of thousands of dollars on like vacation retreats with him and his family, and then goes on to talk about economic reform. Like it's just very funny to me, and maybe like that quote in a vacuum, like taken out of context, homeowners need to maintain the value that they get in their housing investments. Like that's not the concerns of like 95% of the general population. It's affordable housing.
I think that as young people, we do have to be careful about being overly like destructive in our way of making change. So you can obviously see how falling home prices could really be a negative for Canadian society at large, and that's kind of we were talking earlier about the idea of compensation. That's where that idea kind of resonates with me, is that you don't want to come in as it, or at least I don't as a young person, come in and say home prices need to fall, they need to be more affordable, and not think about the repercussions that has for those people who do own homes and have earned those homes, and it's something that gives them financial security. But it definitely is the case that if homes retain their value, it creates a lot of generational inequality, especially for those people whose families are not Canadian and are not homeowners. So it's hard for me to take like a firm stance on whether you want prices to fall or rise from like a countrywide perspective, even if for a personal perspective, you might want them to fall. But those kind of innovative ideas like compensation, where you can retain the values of the homes, yet still make rental and housing more affordable for younger people, is the kind of thinking we need.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point around compensation, because as you guys have all illustrated, housing prices need to fall for homeownership to become more accessible for all of you. But you also don't want the housing wealth of these older generations who have put time and effort and have been in the right position to be able to own a home. You don't want that wealth to be wiped out. You don't want them to suffer as a result. So that, like, where does that leave us, right? Like, that puts us in a position where we need something to kind of fill that void, right? And I think Theo's point about compensation is interesting, right? Like, it's a hypothetical that I think we should think through. Like, how does that sit with you? Do you think if housing prices were to stay the same and homeownership didn't get more accessible for you, do you feel like compensation is something that you deserve?
Can you like describe compensation in more detail? Just like
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, like, when I say compensation, I can be incredibly broad,
Okay.
right? Like, this could range from a subsidy or some form of something that makes it easier for you to pay your rent every month, while the people who own or build homes are still receiving what they need to make a project be created or built.
Or like more rules on FHSAs, like money being deposited, easier to like save or gather interest on your FHSA account. Oh yeah, let's get that. Oh sorry, yeah. You wanna-
Yeah, so, the housing market is dynamic, and so it really does make any potential solution of compensation potentially problematic, in the same way that actually Trudeau's comment directed towards the boomers it's problematic. If you have a whole generation, the biggest demographic in Canadian politics and the population, relying on selling their home in order to fund going into a nice retirement home, which is scary if you don't have that, of course, setting the last leg of life, with relative dignity and comfort. If everyone's doing that at the same time, the housing market crashes and they can't do that. So similarly, the market is dynamic, in which you compensate renters or first-time home buyers. What that does is that drives up the prices even further. There's no free money. That's the problem. Like, where does the money come from this compensation? And I think basically, with the idea of housing prices being as high as they are, it's an example of a bubble economy, because we're not actually producing anything more of value. And that's the problem. That's the actual problem. It's not a real economy, it's a fake economy. And so I think actually, you might have to go a little bit more upstream in order to find the right solution, which why I think you need more purchasing power with money, period. I think you just need more production of things and services.
That was very well said.
Yeah.
No one else has to give as much of an articulate answer as he just both delivered. But if we compare
This is
our
the power
conversation,
of talking to AI, right?
if we
I'm an
could
expert
give
now.
our thoughts on compensation, starting from left to right, that would be awesome. My left once again.
Yeah, I think when you explore the different possibilities of either, I think we can all agree that, the way things are going now, if it continues, if it perpetually gets worse, that's not the path that we want to strive towards. Housing affordability decreases and the wealth being hoarded by those that own homes increases, and what's the solution to that? I, to put simply, don't have an answer, but it can't be the direction that we're going in. It needs to proactively be solutionized today.
Solutionized, I like that.
It's not a word, I made it up. It's not a real word.
Yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily know know what the solution is, but I don't think just throwing money at it is gonna take away from the like much larger issue at hand here. It's very much just a stopgap solution, and yes, the rich are only gonna get richer through this. You mentioned this whole bubble economy thing. Don't know what that is, but I definitely think that's part of the problem here as well. So yeah, I don't know what the solution is, but I definitely think we need to go more upstream if anything.
Let me just jump on this for a second to give like another example of what compensation could look like, because what we're really looking at here is a really broad, trying to paint a broad picture. And I think one thing could be funding for new housing, right? Like I know from my perspective, we don't see housing built for young people. We don't see enough housing built for students. Student housing isn't built, it's not even mentioned really in Canada's national housing strategy. So when you look at compensation, that compensation could come in forms of direct compensation to renters, to people, to young people. That could come in the form of indirect compensation, of just more attention being paid to you, just more ideas of policy or funding being put into this space. But yeah, I just wanted to illustrate that as kind of another layer that could be added on.
I like that. I think we need to reimagine then what housing itself looks like, the way urban planning works, the sort of housing units we build. Like we have this idea of like, you know, the father, mother, 2 children sort of family unit, but let's go beyond that when we look at housing. Like student housing is great. I think that can be way more productive in the long term. So just sort of reimagining the reality of how we hope to group ourselves in the society we live in.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the, like, there's no free money point, and if you're gonna direct money to something new, you do have to kind of point out ways we're spending money that is inefficient now. And I'd also add that the idea of compensation or putting more money into this issue makes a lot more sense to me when you think about it from like a macro lens, not in the sense like, oh, we need to give money to young people to afford housing. But if you think about the opportunity cost of the price of renting housing in Canada, for Canada as a whole, like how many young people have not done the university degree they wanted to do because rents are so high? How many people have been unable to live close enough to their dream job because their rents are so high? And when you think about it that way, it becomes more of like a national unity solution where we need young people with freedom to live where they want and work where they want and study where they want. And so when you think about it like that, the idea of putting more money to it and compensation, whatever that may mean, or however it may manifest, makes a lot more sense, not only to young people who are kind of obviously going to support that, but to the country as a whole.
I think when I think of like compensation, I'm thinking of like maybe subsidized like renting in some way for young people, especially if like you've recently graduated or if you're still in school. That's the way I can think of, but like that would be, I think, difficult to implement because, yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Good answer.
I think compensation is a cool idea, but it immediately makes me think that it's like a Band-Aid solution to like a pretty big deal. Yeah, I agree with what Theo says. I like what Max said too about how it's just like a, you know, a very fluid problem, and so I would assume it has, you know, it needs like a very fluid solution. If anything, it's made me think like outward. It's not like a privilege a lot of other people have, but it's made me think, well, maybe do it like maybe I just move out of Canada or look for housing in, you know, maybe a different province. Like I know people personally who moved to Montreal because that's like a viable solution. They pay half what I do for twice the space. Yeah, even more restrictions, like my rent is getting raised. For what reason, I don't know. I'll just sort of take an excerpt from what you said, but yeah, it's value that's like kind of really non-existent, and yeah.
What more is there to say, really?
People have done a pretty good job explaining, yeah, what's going on today already.
I was gonna focus on the education aspect, because are we and how are we educating our youth? We're talking about FHSA, but there's also RRSP that you can take, I think, up to 35,000 now once you get there to put down towards a house. TFSA, stuff like that, like do our youth know that? Do we have someone who's advising them? We're just running a workshop in your nonprofit or in your school or wherever you're at. And the second thing I wanted to mention is kind of piggybacking on what you said, like I think with housing grants, a lot of organizations offer those for youth. And sometimes these youth are vulnerable and at risk. Kind of ties back into education. Do these youth know about investments and all that stuff? And then in terms of housing grants, they're not going to be there forever. When you think about the nonprofit sector, you're a nonprofit, your money is going back towards your programs, your initiatives, and your staff. But also at the same time, how are you going to scale and make your nonprofit sustainable so that you can continue doing the work that you're doing? You know, running my own nonprofit, it's like, I can see the struggle that I kind of go through to like, you know, even just secure funding, right? There's microgrants, there's so many opportunities available, but if it's like a one-man job, I'm doing everything, and how do I make that sustainable so that I can continue providing programs and opportunities for youth, whether it's like housing, education, or employability, right? So private sector, public sector, who's funding, and when is that money going to stop? You see what's happening with the US aid. A lot of funding got stopped for a lot of nonprofits over there. So what happens when that happens here, especially to organizations that are supporting youth when it comes to housing?
I actually found myself also thinking, of course, public housing can be good. It can be good. It can also be very ugly. It can be, it's like projects, and you have like thousands of houses that all look the same, and it's kind of like, like a Pleasantville kind of situation, right? Housing that's been built extremely quickly via economies of scale, and that's what they care about, and there's no actual inspiration in our environment. I think in Toronto, especially compared to like say Montreal, I just feel like sometimes it's just not as beautiful as it could be.
No, it's
I would-
really
I-
ugly,
Oh, yeah.
like seriously. Seeing all those condos being built, and they're all like just the same box type of like architecture, yeah.
I would say, look at the social housing they're building in like France and Finland, because they're actually building cool housing.
Yeah.
Like-
Yeah, and they have a history of like amazing architecture that the world looks up to too.
Yeah.
They've got the talent.
Yeah,
Maybe we just don't have the talent. Maybe we just got to train some architects to step it up.
On the topic of compensation, I don't know. I feel like it's, I think like someone said a Band-Aid, I think it was after like a Band-Aid solution. I feel like it's just throwing money at a problem that goes much deeper than like, yeah.
I feel like, I agree. I feel like on another side of compensation, I feel like there's a lot of unsafe or like unjust housing conditions that should be compensated for that aren't. And like speaking from experience and like a lot of my friends' experience also, like a lot of conditions can be very unsafe and very concerning, but it doesn't seem to really matter. And I feel like if we are in those positions, having compensation for that would also make up for a little bit of the trauma induced by the housing crisis.
But if I could just add one more point, it's society has always been something where the young people take care of the old people. They really aren't like blood-sucking mosquitoes, just trying to take our wealth and like rig the game for them. The society is set up that, our youth are, the way that we work, our ideas and our imagination does, funnel upwards to the past, to history, to older people. And I think that's a very natural, way to be. Maybe the system is lopsided in one way or another, where they've got all these positions of power still. They're not just, I think that's also kind of interesting to think about too. Maybe our rent is just paying just our dues.
Cool. That's it for that portion.
That portion.
That portion, oh,
No, no, no,
no,
sorry.
hang on, homeowners.
Yeah, well, that's as we said. As we said at the beginning, there's one person in the midst of you who owns a home. And we want you, one by one,
After all this discussion, to
Yeah.
be like,
to try to guess who that person is who owns a home out of the 9 of you.
so you have to go one by one and say a name, and it's no hard feelings. It's no
Say a
hard-
name.
Wait, I don't know anything about these people.
That's just
You
based off their
can start
answers.
Just based off of their responses.
Yeah.
And the way that they convey themselves.
I can't point
Any
and say
context?
you.
I feel like that's not fair though, because some people have talked considerably more than others.
That's true. Maybe the
I
silent
feel like
one
we
is
need
the
to
one you should look for.
I feel like we should establish some more basic information on people, unless we're out of time, then that's fine.
No, we can give you about 2 minutes to do that. So start speaking right now.
Wait, what?
I feel like we can guess.
Do you wanna? Oh yeah, I think so too.
Can I ask
So
how
you-
much money everyone made last year, or is that too?
I think
You asked everyone's job at the
What?
beginning. You did ask everyone's job at the beginning.
I know, yeah, I did.
So I
But
feel
I feel like money is different, like.
I feel like that might be over, we might not want to put people on the spot too.
Wait, do you have a pointed like question or prompts that the general group can answer? Like-
Yeah, how much money do you make?
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm kidding, no, besides that.
I don't. It could be you. You're acting pretty suspicious
Yeah.
right
I
now.
think so, actually.
All right. Do you want to go one by one and guess? And if you don't know someone's name, you can point and really make them feel singled out.
I feel like the gentleman with the lovely collared shirt and the nice black wash jeans, Max. I think you're a good contender to be a homeowner.
I'm gonna double down on that actually, something sneaky in your eyes.
Something endearing and sneaky.
I'm gonna go Andy, pretty stylish fella. I can
Look at
see
his
home.
boots, like straight. He's gonna put a home.
Oh, I'm next. Sorry, I just realized. Maybe Theo?
I like the negative connotation associated with homeowner. Like, which one is it? I would guess probably tuba.
Why?
Why? What's the feeling? It's not like it's not like a personal.
No, I'm just curious.
It's like you're
I
taking
don't
like a
think it's
slice.
anybody else. That's the reason why. It's because you.
I'm torn between 3 people, Andy, Khadijah, and Max.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's you.
Why?
I don't know, I just get that vibe. It's my intuition. It's my homeowner's intuition. I can feel it.
Your homeowner's intuition, so you're a homeowner.
When I close my eyes, I see this bright light just coming from this direction. It's like an X-ray. I think it's you. You're dressed like a homeowner. I don't know what that means. I could just see you lounging in your home.
Two. Who did you want to vote for?
Why choose one person?
Well, you picked 3. We can't give them like a third of a vote.
What? Actually.
Yeah, I don't know if someone you were lying about your living situation too. So I'm gonna go with Andy.
Appreciate you.
I think it's Uma.
What?
Or and if it's not Uma, then it's Max or Andy.
I would think it's Max or Andy.
You guys got to pick one person to throw your vote
Okay,
out.
I think it's.
I think it's
no,
Uma.
I think it's Max.
All right.
Okay, and confirming it's Max or Mac or Mac?
It's Mac.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
I
Mac.
don't know.
I was like, I had it right the entire time. You guys are right going
They're
there.
just all-
I was like,
they're just-
Technically speaking, if I own something like a house, it becomes Mac's house.
Oh.
So in that case, I
You are Max.
You are Max.
Except
So
I'm
what
not-
else?
Let's
except
just
I'm not
hang on.
Max.
Let's just put a tally on it really quickly. Do you want to change your vote?
Yeah. I want to change it to Khadijah.
Okay. Let's just put a tally on it real quick. If you voted for Andy, put your hand up. Okay. I'm trying to think who else got votes.
If you voted for Kadisha, put your hand up. If you voted for Mac, put your hand up.
If you voted for Theo, put your hand up.
If you voted for Jabina, put your hand up.
Is that?
Yeah. That's funny.
If you voted for
Jobina.
If you voted for Tuba, put your hand up.
Yeah, I did, but I think I want to actually change mine.
I don't know if you can do that.
No?
No.
Am I locked in?
No,
You're
alright.
rigid?
Would anybody like to change their vote? Because I believe we have 2 on Mac
I
and
guess it's
2 on
not
Andy.
really fair considering.
How many
we-
on Jobina?
One, it's just you. Just you, bro.
This is like a help me.
That's not fair,
like,
you know each
please. I don't think it's Jobina though.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
I would never lie.
I was actually gonna go with maybe
Jobina
3.
could all
I don't know. Everyone's so like
Jobina
ambiguous.
could definitely own the house, for
I
sure.
agree.
I'm changing my vote to this guy.
Ooh.
His name is Theo also.
All right, let's everyone lock in your vote. If you're voting for Andy, put your hand up. This is your final vote.
Oh man.
You know, at the end of the day, I don't want to judge by looks or like
Oh.
what we said. You know? Seriously though.
But I mean, you're not just judging by looks because we did just have like an hour-long conversation.
Can we deliberate for
Everybody pull your personality out.
Yeah.
No,
deliberate.
literally, like, we don't know each other like
It's
that.
getting
That's the
spicy
point.
now.
That's the
Andy,
point.
stand up for yourself, man.
That's fake hype.
All right, I'll give you guys 1 minute to deliberate over this, and then I will ask for a final vote.
Can whoever has the most votes
Who has the most
give
votes
us
though?
give a maybe a.
All right,
a
right
rundown
now,
on why
Andy
they
has
like
2 votes, Theo has 2 votes, and Mac has 2 votes.
So do we make the case that we're
We
not?
fend for ourselves.
Yeah.
If you would like.
Or we break the tie, perhaps.
I live with my parents, so.
He lives with his parents.
What if his parents live with him?
Oh.
Guys, it's not.
No, it's not. I don't know what to tell you. She's lying.
I'm fine.
Anything else to say?
State your case, Mac. All eyes are on you.
With Jobina, it's just purely a feel.
State your case for yourself.
Not making a case for me.
I can't defend myself. I've seen I've said my piece.
Okay, and did you have anything to say for yourself?
I'd like to say that I come from a first generation newcomer background, but my parents don't have anything past a high school degree. I came here, my immediate family extends to just my parents, my mom, and like 3 or 4 others. So I come from very little to nearly nothing. These boots are fake, this sweater is fake, this jacket is fake. I just really care about my style. I don't see how I would be able to afford a home right now. I live with my parents. So,
At least you look cool.
Yeah.
thank you, Bev.
I have a question. Are you guys involved in this too, or?
No.
All right.
That was
Are you
fine.
guys feeling confident to lock in your votes?
Are we voting again?
Show yourself.
All right, I'm gonna go 1 by 1 from my left to my right. If you would like to cast a vote for Andy and lock a vote in for Andy, raise your hand.
Even after all that movie conversation.
I gotta stick with myself.
That's messed up.
If you want to cast a vote for Theo, put your hand
What about
up.
other people?
No, we could go 1 by 1.
If you want to cast a vote for Rhea, put your hand up. You see how that was a pointless reduction activity? Did you see what
Change the
that
vote. What do people change the vote?
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
was? I'm gonna get it.
If anyone would like to vote for Theo, put your hand up. Ooh. People are convinced by Theo's comment, but Theo was not convinced by Andy's comment.
Wow.
Society. If you think it's Kadisha, put your hand up.
Guilty.
If you think it's Axel, put your hand up.
Ooh, revenge.
Out of nowhere!
I see it. I see it.
This camera's gonna get the shock on my face.
Spit take.
Alright, if you think it's Tuba, put your hand up.
Yeah, no. My vote is changing.
That's messed up.
The longer we
That's
drag
messed
this
up,
on,
Axel.
Hey, what do you mean? How's that
Oh
messed
my
up?
God.
We've just dragged this out for so long that I just think it's somebody
No,
new.
put your hand up.
We're almost done.
If you think it's Mac, put your hand up.
3 votes.
Oh man.
Wow.
Max just expertise in AI.
That's true.
Sorry.
I think they're perceiving the home I have in my heart.
Wow. You have to say, home is where the condo is. Oh my god. I was trying to do it. Oh. If you think it's Jabina, put your hand up.
Are we surprised? I'm not.
Just me.
Alright, if you think it's Uma, put your hand up.
Some of y'all did not vote. Wait,
Everyone voted.
wait, I swear.
I think everyone has voted. We
Okay.
have 1 vote on Andy, 1 vote on Kadisha, 1 vote on Axel, 3 votes on Mac.
One vote
One
on
vote.
Jabina from Mac, and 1 vote Uma from you.
Yeah.
Alright, I know to the big reveal.
Yeah.
None of you own a home.
Oh, what the hell?
Do you guys think anyone our age would be able to own a home in Toronto?
Why would you do that?
They're unhappy too.
Y'all,
Marina.
I actually lived down the street, like, right there.
No, guys, the homeowner was their friends we made.
I was actually thinking, I didn't know that was gonna happen, but I was thinking, well, I invited both of you guys, and I definitely have no idea what your living status is, so there could have been surprise homeowners in the midst, but I guess not.
There's also no physical tell. That's pretty.
I think age would be the tell, probably, but you know.
You never know though, like sometimes people, like, they have a dead relative or something.
Or it could be
Never
trapping.
knows
It could be trapping.
I've heard of someone like wife has like a penthouse, and that's because like
Her parents.
her family. That's what it is. Like she just it was like her like 18th birthday.
That's crazy.
Yeah, her parents like this girl. Her parents were like bankers or something. Yeah, it happens.
Thank you.
Yeah, it could have been you. It could
It
have been me.
happens. Could have been any of us.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Sorry.
But it wasn't.
You know what? I was like,
One day it'll be all of us.
Well, all right. I just want to say thank you. This is the end of it. I just want to say
That's it.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I really appreciate you guys spending your Wednesday night with us.
It means a lot to us.
It does.
Awesome.
More to me, James. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That was
It
fun.
means a lot to me.
I literally was so excited. I was like, what questions I'm gonna ask?